Welcome, dear listeners, to a journey through the human heart. Today I will tell a story that travels through time like a whisper of silk, the saga of Isabel Mendoza, a young woman who will discover that true love is not born from perfection, but from the courage to accept life's scars. Within the stone walls of Castillo de Valdemar, ancient secrets sleep like roses preserved in forgotten books, waiting for the right moment to bloom. This is a story of honor, sacrifice, and redemption, where the harshest winter can give way to the sweetest spring. A narrative that reminds us that sometimes it is necessary to lose everything to find what truly matters. And you, where are you watching us from? Share your city in the comments. I love getting to know our listeners scattered around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave that special like to support our work. Every like is like a lit candle illuminating these timeless stories. Winter of 1849, Kingdom of Western Castile, Spain. The snowstorm lashed against the windows of Castillo de Valdemar like ghostly fingers scratching at ancient glass. Isabel Mendoza pulled the dark wool shawl tighter around her shoulders, watching through the small carriage window, the imposing silhouette that emerged from the grey mist, stone towers that pierced the sky like desperate prayers, walls that guarded centuries of stories whispered only to the wind. At 22, Isabel carried on her face the melancholy serenity of one who had learned early that life offers more shadows than light. An orphan since 16, when consumption had taken her father, the Latin professor Don Alejandro Mendoza, she had grown up among dusty books and whispered lessons. The convent of Santa Teresa had been her refuge after her father's death. There, among the silent sisters, she had honed her knowledge of languages, music, and letters, preparing for an uncertain future. The advertisement had arrived like a disguised blessing. An educated governess was sought to care for an orphan girl at Castillo de Valdemar. The correspondence had been exchanged through the local parish priest, and Isabel had accepted without hesitation. What choice did a woman without a dowry, without family, without any talent other than her refined education have? The carriage swayed violently as it passed through the main gate, and for the first time, Isabel glimpsed the castle gardens, once magnificent, now surrendered to the sleep of winter, with silent fountains and statues covered by veils of snow. The contrast between the decadent grandeur and the subtle neglect created an atmosphere that touched her heart with a strange familiarity, as if she recognized in those ancient stones her own condition of noble decay. Patricio, the butler, awaited her at the main entrance. Tall and austere, with graying hair combed back and eyes of a blue faded by time, he wore an impeccable dark livery. His hands, as he helped her down from the carriage, were firm but gentle. "Señorita Mendoza," his voice carried a refined Castilian accent, "welcome to Castillo de Valdemar. I am Patricio Herrera, butler of this house for over 30 years. The great hall welcomed her with vaulted ceilings that were lost in the shadows, faded tapestries that told of forgotten battles, and a cold that seemed to spring from the stones themselves. The smell of candle wax mixed with the subtle scent of lavender and the heavier perfume of secular wood. Isabel felt a shiver. She couldn't tell if it came from the cold or the solemnity of the place. "The Count is attending to urgent matters," Patricio explained, guiding her through corridors lined with portraits of ancestors with piercing gazes. "But he left precise instructions for your reception." They stopped before a dark wooden door, adorned with wrought iron. "Your quarters, señorita." The west wing reserved for guests of honor. The room was simple but elegant. A bed with a carved wooden canopy, a writing desk by the window overlooking the gardens, a fireplace where fragrant logs crackled. Isabel lightly touched the fabric of the curtains, burgundy velvet faded by time but still noble in its simplicity. "Meals are served in the smaller dining room at 8, noon and 6 in the evening," Patricio continued, placing her only suitcase on a trunk at the foot of the bed. "The girl, Carmen, has lunch in the hall at 11 and dines at 5. Esperanza, our head of the maids, will introduce you to the house routine tomorrow morning." Isabel nodded, noticing something in the butler's voice when he mentioned the girl, a careful tenderness, as one speaks of something fragile. "There is only one inviolable rule in this house, señorita." Patricio's tone became more grave. "The north wing remains closed to guests. Any need in that sector must be communicated to me personally, so that I may request express permission from the Count." The way he said it, with an almost religious solemnity, made Isabel raise her eyes to study his face. Patricio held her gaze with a seriousness that did not invite questions. "I understand," she murmured. although a strange curiosity was already sprouting in her chest like a seed cast on fertile ground. When she was alone, Isabel approached the window. The storm had subsided, leaving the world covered by an immaculate white mantle. On the horizon, among the bare trees, she glimpsed the dark surface of a lake, its black waters contrasting with the snow like an open eye on the pale face of the earth. She sat on the edge of the bed, slowly removing her wool gloves. Her hands, small and well cared for despite adversity, trembled slightly, not from cold, but from an indefinable emotion. There was something in that place that resonated with her own soul, as if the castle were also an orphan of something lost in time. That first night, as the wind howled through the towers, Isabel lay awake listening to the sounds of the old house, creaking wood, distant footsteps, echoing in unknown corridors, and something else, a low, almost imperceptible murmur, as if the very stones were whispering ancient secrets. She pulled the covers up to her chin and closed her eyes, not knowing that she had just stepped into a story that would forever change her understanding of love, sacrifice, and redemption. The Castillo de Valdemar held mysteries that would soon prove more complex than any romance she had read in her father's dusty books. And somewhere in the forbidden wing, a man with brown eyes contemplated the moon through frosted glass, wondering if the new governess would be strong enough to bear the burdens those ancient stones carried. The morning arrived, dressed in silver and crystal. Isabel awoke to the gentle touch of Soledad, a young maid with rosy cheeks and gentle brown eyes, who brought warm water scented with herbs for her bath. "Buenos dias, señorita," the girl murmured with a sweet rustic accent. "Esperanza awaits you in the breakfast room." Isabel wore her best dress, a simple navy blue wool model with a white lace collar, an inheritance from more prosperous times, and descended the marble staircase that echoed her steps like solemn music. The smaller dining room proved to be cozy, dark wood-paneled walls, a round table set with delicate porcelain, and windows that filtered the morning light through linen curtains. Esperanza awaited her, a middle-aged woman, robust and dignified, with brown hair tied in an impeccable bun and a spotless white apron over her black dress. Her face, marked by time and responsibility, lit up with a genuine smile. "Señorita Mendoza, what a pleasure to receive you. I am Esperanza Ruiz, responsible for the domestic care of the house for 15 years. The conversation flowed naturally over hot chocolate and toast with quince jam. Esperanza told her about the castle's routine, the meal times, the library that Isabel could use freely, and the gardens that, despite the winter, offered invigorating walks. "And the girl, Carmen?" Isabel asked, cutting a piece of cured cheese. Esperanza's face softened with a maternal tenderness. "A special child, señorita. She lost her parents in the cholera epidemic of 1845, when she was only 5. The Count took her in as his ward, and since then she has been the ray of sunshine in this house." Before she could answer, light steps echoed in the hallway, and a girl appeared at the entrance of the room like a vision of spring in the midst of winter. Carmen was 9 years old, with brown hair that fell in natural curls to her shoulders, and dark eyes that shone with the innocent curiosity of childhood. She wore a dark green velvet dress with a lace collar, simple but well cut. "Is it her, Esperanza? Is it the new señorita?" Her voice was as clear as a crystal bell filled with expectation. "Carmen, come and properly greet Señorita Mendoza," Esperanza gently chided. The girl approached with the natural grace of well-mannered children, curtsied perfectly, and extended her tiny hand. "Buenos dias, Señorita Mendoza. I am Carmen Dolores Vasquez, ward of the Count of Valdemar." Isabel took the delicate hand in hers, touched by the childish solemnity. "Buenos dias, Carmen. It will be a pleasure to take care of your education. Esperanza told me the señorita speaks French and plays the piano. Is it true? Can I learn?" The girl's eyes sparkled with even more intensity. "Of course, my dear." Breakfast continued with Carmen chattering about her favorite books, her dolls, and the stories she invented for herself during the long winter days. Isabel noticed in the child a lively intelligence, but also a subtle melancholy, the indelible mark of one who had lost the natural protection of family too soon. It was then that he appeared. Isabel felt his presence before she even saw him, a sudden shift in the atmosphere of the room, as if the air had thickened. Carmen jumped from her chair with spontaneous joy. "Tio Rafael, come meet our new governess." The man who appeared at the entrance was exactly what Isabel expected of a Castilian count, but also much more. Don Rafael de Montemayor was 35, with an imposing height that filled the doorway. broad shoulders under a flawlessly cut dark wool coat. His black hair had a few premature streaks of silver at the temples, giving him an air of mature dignity. But it was his eyes that impressed her most, deep brown like damp earth after the rain, filled with a melancholy that seemed rooted in his soul. "Señorita Mendoza." His voice was deep, polite, but Isabel detected a note of weariness in it, as if each word cost a subtle effort. "Welcome to Castillo de Valdemar." He approached with controlled, elegant movements, and Isabel noticed in the lines of his face an aristocratic beauty marked by something indefinable, perhaps sorrow, perhaps just the weight of responsibility. When he took her hand for the formal greeting, Isabel felt an involuntary tremor run up her arm. "It is an honor to serve in your house, Count," she managed to reply, keeping her voice steady despite the sudden racing of her heart. "Carmen told me you studied at the convent of Santa Teresa. Excellent education." He turned to the girl with a smile that completely transformed his severe expression. "And you, little one, are you excited about your new lessons?" "Very. Señorita Mendoza said she will teach me French and piano." "Perfect. A young lady must master the arts." His eyes returned to Isabel. "Señorita, if you need anything for your lessons, books, sheet music, writing materials, inform Patricio. I wish for Carmen to receive the best possible education." There was something in the way he said it. Not the cold authority of a master giving orders, but the genuine concern of a dedicated guardian. Isabel nodded. "Certainly, Count." He remained for a few more minutes, asking Carmen about her studies from the previous day, patiently listening to her stories about the castle's cats and her plans for the day. Isabel watched, fascinated, the transformation that occurred in the melancholy man. In the girl's presence he became lighter, younger, as if Carmen were a balm for some ancient wound. "Well, I must leave you. I have correspondence to attend to." He turned to Isabel one last time. "I hope you feel at home, Señorita. This castle has long needed a renewing feminine presence." After he left, the room seemed larger, emptier. Carmen continued to chat happily, but Isabel found herself thinking about those brown eyes, the melancholy that inhabited them, and the carefully chosen words, renewing feminine presence. What did that mean? "Carmen," she said softly, "how long have you lived at the castle?" "4 years since Mama and Papa went to heaven." The answer came without sadness, just with the naturalness of one who has accepted reality. "Tio Raphael brought me here and said I would be his little princess. He's not my real uncle, you know, but he asked me to call him that." "And are you happy here?" Carmen tilted her little head, thoughtful. "Yes, but sometimes Tio Raphael gets very sad. Esperanza says he carries many worries. I try to make him smile, but I don't always succeed." That answer touched Isabel deeply. There was a precocious wisdom in the child, the keen perception of one who grew up observing adults, trying to understand their mysteries. The rest of the morning passed quickly as Isabel explored the library, a majestic salon with floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with volumes in Castilian, Latin, French, and Italian. Carmen showed her her favorite books, and together they planned the first lessons. But throughout that time, Isabel couldn't get the image of Don Raphael out of her mind. His natural elegance, the sadness that seemed to permanently inhabit his eyes, and the unexpected kindness he had shown Carmen. What secrets did that man hold? And why did his presence so disturb the careful peace Isabel had built around her heart? The first few weeks at Castillo de Valdemar passed with the gentle regularity of a familiar song. Isabel had established a pleasant routine with Carmen, mornings dedicated to French and mathematics lessons, afternoons of piano in the music room, an intimate chamber with a rosewood pianoforte that responded to the touch like silk under her fingers. The girl showed a natural aptitude for languages and a musical sensitivity that touched Isabel's heart. Don Raphael would occasionally appear during the lessons, always discreet, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, observing with silent attention. His appearances were brief but intense. Isabel felt watched with an interest that went beyond mere educational supervision. When their eyes met, the Count would offer a courteous smile and withdraw, leaving behind a subtle scent of sandalwood and leather. But it was during the nights that the castle revealed its true nature. Isabel discovered that sleep came with difficulty in those ancient quarters. Perhaps it was the dense silence, broken only by the distant howl of the wind, or perhaps it was something more subtle, a restlessness that seemed to spring from the very stones. On the third night, lying in her canopy bed, she distinctly heard a sound that made her sit up abruptly. Murmurs coming from somewhere distant in the castle, muffled voices that were lost in the corridors like echoes of forgotten prayers. She wrapped herself in her flannel robe and approached the door, pressing her ear against the cold wood. The murmurs came from the direction of the north wing, the forbidden area. They were female voices, one speaking low in a reassuring tone, the other responding with unintelligible, almost childish words. Isabel returned to bed, but sleep would not come. On the following nights, the sounds repeated, always from the same direction, always in the same tone of intimate conversation between people who shared a secret. It was Carmen who, innocently, offered the first clue. They were in the garden on a pale, sunny afternoon, Carmen playing with Mistral, a brown cat with green eyes that followed her like a faithful dog. Isabel was sewing by the deactivated fountain, enjoying the soft light that filtered through the clouds. The girl, chasing the cat, suddenly stopped and looked up at the windows of the North Tower. "Sometimes she sings so beautifully," she commented casually, petting Mistral. "Who sings, my dear?" "The lady who lives in the tower. Last night she sang a very sweet lullaby. Esperanza says it's to ward off nightmares." Isabel felt a chill run down her spine. She carefully put her sewing back in the basket. "What lady, Carmen?" The girl looked at her with the genuine surprise of someone who doesn't understand adults' ignorance of obvious facts. "The lady of the North Tower. She cries during the day, but at night she sings. Tio Rafael says she is ill and needs a lot of care. Have you ever seen her?" Carmen shook her head, making her curls dance. "I'm not allowed to go to that part of the castle. It's a very important rule. But sometimes, when I pass by the corridor that leads to the library, I hear Esperanza talking to her, telling her stories to help her sleep." That revelation echoed in Isabel's mind for the rest of the day. At night, during dinner in the small dining room, she discreetly observed the expressions of Esperanza and Soledad. Both seemed tense when the conversation approached any topic related to the North Wing. When Isabel casually mentioned hearing strange sounds during the night, Esperanza lowered her eyes and murmured something about winds that make the timbers groan. Patricio, serving the wine, intervened with silent authority. "The old towers have their peculiarities, señorita. Corridors that amplify sounds, echoes that travel in unexpected ways, nothing to worry about." But Isabel noticed in the butler's voice the same careful tension she had seen in the maid's. There was a secret being carefully guarded by the entire staff. That night she decided to investigate. She waited until she was sure the entire castle was asleep, then wrapped herself in her robe and silently left her quarters. The corridors, lit only by the moonlight filtering through the high windows, looked like tunnels of silver and shadow. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold stones as she cautiously made her way to the north wing. She reached what seemed to be an invisible boundary, a narrower corridor, lined with ancient tapestries that exuded the smell of mold and time. A dark oak door, adorned with wrought iron, blocked the passage. Isabel approached, her heart beating hard against her ribs. It was then that she heard them clearly. Murmurs coming from beyond the door, words in Castilian spoken with maternal tenderness. "Don't cry, mi niña. Don't cry. Tomorrow the sun will return, and you will see how everything will be better." The voice belonged unmistakably to Esperanza. But who was the niña? Isabel pressed her ear to the wood, trying to catch more. "Rafael. Where is Rafael?" A second voice, female but strange, too high-pitched with the peculiar inflection of a frightened child, though clearly coming from an adult woman. "He will come to visit you tomorrow, as he always does. Now sleep, my dear. Sleep and dream of beautiful things." Isabel recoiled from the door as if she had been burned. She hurried back to her rooms, but it took hours for her to fall asleep. Who was that woman? Why did she live locked away? And what was her relationship with Don Rafael? The next day, during lessons, Isabel observed Carmen with new attention. The girl, concentrating on copying sentences in French, murmured distractedly, "Last night, she cried a lot. Esperanza stayed there until very late." "Carmen," Isabel chose her words carefully, "do you know why this lady lives in the tower?" The girl raised her serious brown eyes. "Tio Rafael explained to me that some people get sick in their minds, just as others get sick in their bodies. He said we must have compassion and care for them with kindness, even when they can't quite recognize us." The answer, surprisingly mature for a 9-year-old, deeply touched Isabel, but it also raised more questions. Who was this woman to Don Rafael? A relative? The possibility that was beginning to form in her mind was both logical and terrifying. Isabel spent the rest of the day restless, observing the shadows of the castle with new eyes, noticing nuances that had previously escaped her. The way Patricio averted his gaze when he spoke of family matters. The way Esperanza sighed when she passed near the staircase leading to the North Tower. The way Don Rafael himself, in the brief moment she saw him, carried a weight on his shoulders that seemed to go far beyond the normal responsibilities of a nobleman. The Castillo de Valdemar held a secret that involved everyone, and Isabel was beginning to suspect that this secret had a name. The woman of the North Tower, who cried by day and sang by night, and who called for Raphael with the voice of a lost child. The following weeks brought a subtle but profound transformation to the atmosphere of the castle. Spring began to awaken in the gardens, small green shoots breaking through the dark earth, the faint scent of early flowers mixing with the still chilly air, and with it, something was also awakening in Isabel's heart. Don Rafael had begun to appear more frequently during lessons, no longer just quick observations from the doorway, but genuine participation. He would sit in an armchair near the pianoforte, listening to Carmen play her scales with focused attention, or he would flip through the French books, making insightful comments on the girl's progress. "Excellent pronunciation, Carmen," he said one golden March afternoon, as the girl recited a poem by La Fontaine. "Señorita Mendoza, your methods are admirable." Isabel felt her face flush slightly at the compliment. There was something in the Count's voice when he addressed her, a softer, almost intimate note, which contrasted with the formality maintained in front of the servants. "Carmen is an exceptional student, Count. She has a natural facility for languages. Like her teacher." Don Rafael's brown eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made the air seem thicker. "Patricio told me you also master Italian and Latin, in addition to Castilian and French. My father was very demanding with my education. A wise man. Knowledge is the only patrimony that can never be stolen." There was a melancholy in that sentence, as if he spoke from personal experience. Isabel noticed in the lines around the Count's eyes the marks of someone who had known significant losses. Gradually, these conversations began to extend beyond the lessons. Don Rafael started inviting her for walks through the gardens after dinner, always accompanied by Carmen, maintaining the propriety of appearances. During these walks, Isabel discovered a man very different from the solemn and distant figure she had imagined. "Do you see that rose bush?" he pointed out one afternoon, stopping before a seemingly dead shrub. "It was planted by my grandmother, the Countess Dolores. She used to say that roses were like people. They look dead in winter, but their true life is in the roots waiting for the right time to bloom again." "And does your grandmother still live?" "She died when I was 15, but her lessons remain." He gently touched a dry branch. "She taught me that patience is the most difficult virtue of true nobility." Isabel studied his profile as he contemplated the rosebush. There was a rare quality in Don Rafael among men of his position, a complete absence of arrogance. He treated the servants with genuine respect, spoke to Carmen as if her childish opinions were important, and addressed Isabel not as an employee, but as an equal. One evening, as they were returning from one of these walks, Carmen running ahead chasing fireflies, Don Rafael stopped suddenly. "Señorita Mendoza, may I ask you a personal question?" Isabel's heart quickened. "Certainly, Count. Do you feel lonely here, far from everything you know?" The question surprised her with its direct simplicity. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but Carmen has brought light to my days, and—" She hesitated, then decided to be honest. "This place has something that touches me deeply, as if there is a melancholy that echoes my own." Don Rafael looked at her with a new intensity. "You understand? Few would understand that." "Understand what?" "That there is beauty in melancholy when accepted with dignity, that places can hold not just stories, but feelings." He stopped walking and turned completely towards her. "Isabel, may I call you that?" The sound of her name on his lips sent a wave of warmth through her body. "You may. Isabel, it has been a long time since I have met someone who understands the subtler nuances of existence. Someone with whom I can talk about something beyond practical matters." They looked at each other in silence, and Isabel realized that something fundamental had changed between them. It was no longer just the formal relationship between master and employee, but something deeper and more dangerous. The confirmation came the following week during an unexpected visit. The Countess of Alarcon arrived on a rainy afternoon, accompanied by her daughter Esperanza, a beautiful blonde 20-year-old, clearly interested in impressing Don Rafael. During the formal dinner in the Great Hall, Isabel was introduced simply as Carmen's governess, and she felt the weight of their condescending glances. A very young governess, commented the Countess, studying Isabel with critical eyes. In my day we preferred more mature women for such positions. Señorita Mendoza's age is less relevant than her exceptional education, Don Rafael replied, with a firmness that surprised everyone. Carmen has never progressed so much in her studies. The public defense was a moment of revelation for Isabel. Don Rafael not only respected her, but was willing to defend her in front of his own social class. The gesture, though small, carried profound meaning in a society governed by rigid hierarchies. After dinner, as the guests retired to the music room, Isabel was preparing to return to her quarters when Don Rafael intercepted her in the hallway. "Isabel, a moment?" She turned and found in his eyes an emotion that made her heart race. "I want you to know that I admire not only your competence as an educator, but you as a woman. Your grace, your intelligence, the way Carmen has grown attached to you." He took a step closer. "It has been a long time since I have felt a genuine interest in someone." Isabel could barely breathe. The words she had dreamed of hearing from some worthy man were there, being spoken by Don Rafael de Montemayor himself. "Count, I also feel something special for our acquaintance, Rafael," he said softly. "When we are alone, I would like you to simply call me Rafael." The name left her lips like a caress. Rafael. He smiled, the first truly happy smile she had seen on him. For a moment, the usual melancholy completely vanished from his eyes, replaced by something that looked like hope. That night, Isabel lay awake for hours, her heart singing a new song. For the first time since her father's death, she felt truly alive, as if she had discovered a part of herself she never knew existed. But in the silent towers of the castle, echoes of distant crying continued to wander through the dark corridors, reminding her that some secrets can turn happiness to ash with the speed of lightning. The library of Castillo de Valdemar had become Isabel and Raphael's secret sanctuary. It was there, among ancient volumes that exuded the scent of parchment and accumulated wisdom, that their conversations flowed with the naturalness of souls that recognize each other. The April afternoons arrived imbued with the fragrance of wildflowers, and the golden light that filtered through the high windows created an atmosphere of sacred intimacy. Isabel had discovered in Raphael a man of surprising erudition. He knew the Latin classics with the familiarity of a scholar, discussed philosophy with the passion of one who had found in ideas a refuge for deep personal questions, and spoke of music with a sensitivity that revealed an artistic soul carefully hidden beneath his aristocratic dignity. "Have you read the sonnets of Garcilaso?" he asked one golden afternoon, leafing through a leather-bound volume. "Naturally. My father considered them essential to understanding the Castilian soul." Rafael opened the book to a marked page, and his voice took on a musical quality as he recited, "En tanto que de rosa y azucena se muestra la color en vuestro gesto, y que vuestro mirar ardiente, honesto, enciende el corazón y lo refrena, while the color of rose and lily shows on your face, and your ardent, honest gaze ignites the heart and restrains it." The words hung in the air like golden silk, and Isabel felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something in the way Raphael recited, not just reading but feeling each verse, that touched her deeply. Garcilaso understood that true love is not just passion, he said, gently closing the book, but a mutual recognition of something deeper than physical attraction. "And you, sir?" Isabel hesitated, then dared. "Do you believe that?" Raphael's brown eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made the air seem thicker. "Now I do." The simple confession carried a weight of truth that made Isabel lower her eyes, her face flushed with emotion. The silence that followed was not awkward, but pregnant with meaning, as if they both understood they had crossed an invisible frontier. Carmen, playing on the nearby rug with Mistral, lifted her head. "Tio Rafael, you're red. Do you have a fever?" The tense moment dissolved into genuine laughter from both of them. "No, little one, just the afternoon heat." But Isabel realized that something fundamental had changed in that instant. The glances they now exchanged carried an unspoken promise, a tacit understanding that their destinies were intertwining irreversibly. The following weeks brought a subtle but profound happiness. Raphael began to seek her company, not only during Carmen's lessons but in small, stolen moments. A casual encounter in the gardens at dawn, when Isabel was picking flowers to decorate the study, prolonged conversations after dinner, when Carmen was already asleep and they would walk through the corridors lit only by candelabras, their voices whispering so as not to disturb the sacred silence of the night. During these walks, Raphael told her fragments of his story. The early death of his parents, the responsibility he had assumed at a very young age over the lands and his subjects, the loneliness that had grown over the years like a weed in the garden of his soul. "Sometimes I think that nobles pay a very high price for their privileges," he confessed one night, stopping before a portrait of his ancestors. "We are educated to serve an ideal of honor and duty, but rarely to be happy." "And are you not happy?" Isabel asked softly. "I wasn't. Before you arrived, this house was just a museum of memory. Now," he turned to her, and the candlelight danced in his eyes. "Now there is music where before there was only silence." The confession was so sincere that Isabel felt tears prick her eyes. "Raphael, Isabel, there is something I need to tell you. For a long time now." The moment they both knew was inevitable had arrived. They were in the library, on a day of soft rain that pattered against the windows like impatient fingers. Carmen had gone to visit the kitchens with Esperanza, leaving them alone for the first time in weeks. Raphael approached the window, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the drops run down the glass like silver tears. "Isabel, before I met you, I had lost faith in the possibility of being happy. This house, these responsibilities, the weight of family tradition, it all felt like a gilded cage from which there was no escape." He turned to her, and Isabel saw raw vulnerability in his eyes. "You brought light where there was only gloom, not just for Carmen but for me." Isabel stood motionless, her heart beating so hard she feared he could hear it. "I do not speak out of convenience nor out of loneliness," he continued, approaching slowly. "I speak because I have found in you the peace I thought was lost forever, the companion I sought without knowing, the soul that recognizes mine." He stopped before her, and Isabel saw his hands tremble slightly as he reached out to take hers. "Isabel Mendoza, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The words that changed everything were spoken with absolute simplicity, without grandiloquence, but filled with a sincerity that touched Isabel to the very marrow of her bones. She looked at this man, noble, refined, but above all genuine, who offered not just social position but true love. "Raphael, yes." The word came out as a whisper, but it carried the weight of a decision that would forever change her destiny. "Yes, I accept." The smile that lit up Raphael's face was like the sun breaking through stormy clouds. He gently kissed her hands, a chaste kiss, but laden with promise. "We will have a simple ceremony," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "In the castle chapel, with only the people who truly matter. Carmen will be radiant." Isabel nodded, tears of happiness streaming silently down her cheeks. For the first time since her father's death, she felt she had found her place in the world. They remained like that, hands intertwined, looking at each other as if to memorize that perfect moment. Outside, the rain continued its soft music, and in Isabel's heart, a golden hope bloomed like candlelight. But in the silent towers of the north wing, echoes of a forgotten presence continued to whisper secrets that would soon turn that perfect happiness into a test of love, deeper than any romance had ever dreamed. The future, like the roses of Countess Dolores, held hidden thorns beneath its apparent beauty. The eve of the wedding arrived dressed in golden expectation. Isabel had spent the day in a cloud of discreet preparations. Esperanza and Soledad had transformed her navy blue dress into something approaching festive with white lace and ribbons, while Carmen, radiant with happiness, practiced her role as the sole bridesmaid. The castle chapel had been decorated with wildflowers picked from the gardens, daisies, violets, and the first rosebuds of the season. Simple but touching, exactly as Raphael had wished. The ceremony would be celebrated by Father Martin, the parish priest of Valdemar for 30 years, who had known Raphael since he was a child. Isabel retired to her rooms shortly after dinner, but sleep refused to come. A strange restlessness had taken hold of her chest, not fear of the wedding, but something indefinable, as if the castle itself were whispering warnings she could not comprehend. She rose and approached the window. Outside, the May night was fragrant and mild, with a full moon pouring silver over the sleeping gardens. She should have been completely happy, but a persistent shadow clouded her joy, like a passing cloud over a bright sun. It was then that she heard them again, the murmurs coming from the north wing. This time, however, they were not the usual whispered, reassuring sounds. There was a desperate tone to them, muffled cries, hurried footsteps, tense voices filled with urgency. Isabel wrapped herself in her robe and silently left her quarters. The corridor was plunged into shadow, lit only by the moon filtering through the high windows. The sounds intensified as she approached the forbidden wing, clearly an emergency. When she reached the corridor leading to the North Tower, she saw light seeping from under the oak door. Female voices overlapped in a tone of controlled urgency. Isabel approached, her heart racing with the knowledge that she was about to violate the most sacred rule of the castle. "Please, Beatrice, get back into bed," she heard Esperanza's voice, laden with forced patience. "It's not safe to stand by the window like that. Raphael, where is Raphael?" The reply came in a high, hysterical female voice. "He promised he would come. He promised he wouldn't leave me alone." Raphael, the name of her future husband, shouted in desperation by an unknown woman, struck Isabel like a blow to the chest. Without thinking of the consequences, she turned the doorknob. The scene that was revealed was forever etched in her memory, like a nightmare crystallized into reality. The room was large but somber, furnished like a child's bedroom, an old cradle converted into a small bed, toys scattered on the floor, curtains with faded childish prints. Esperanza and Soledad were trying to calm a woman whom Isabel immediately recognized as the source of all the castle's mysteries. Beatrice, for it could only be her, was about 35, but her expression was that of a frightened child. Disheveled brown hair fell over her thin shoulders, and her eyes, once surely beautiful, now had the glazed opacity of someone who has lost touch with reality. She wore a linen nightgown, yellowed with time and use, and her bare feet paced the cold floor with desperate impatience. "Senora!" Soledad was the first to notice Isabel at the door. "You cannot be here." But it was too late. Beatrice had also turned, and upon seeing an unfamiliar face, she recoiled against the window like a cornered animal. "Who is she? Who is she? Go get Raphael. He needs to know there's a strange woman in our house." Our house. The words echoed in Isabel's chest like funeral bells. So this was the truth they had all guarded so carefully. "Señorita Mendoza, please leave," pleaded Esperanza, approaching Beatrice with reassuring gestures. "It's not what it seems." "It's not what it seems?" Isabel felt her voice come out hoarse, unrecognizable. "Then tell me what it is." It was at that moment that heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. Patricio appeared at the entrance, followed by a figure that made Isabel's world crumble completely. Raphael, in a dark robe, his hair disheveled as if he had just rushed out of bed, looked from the woman at the window to Isabel at the door with the expression of someone watching their world shatter into irreparable fragments. "Beatrice, what happened?" His voice, addressed to the woman, was infinitely gentle. "Why aren't you sleeping?" "Raphael!" Beatrice ran to him with the pure joy of a child, throwing her arms around his neck. "I had nightmares. I dreamed you were leaving, that you would abandon me." Raphael closed his eyes, hugging her with the tenderness of one comforting a frightened daughter. But over her head, his eyes met Isabel's, and in them she read all the truth she needed to know. "Isabel," he murmured, his voice broken. "Who is she?" Isabel asked, though in the depths of her soul she already knew the answer. Raphael remained silent for a long moment, still consoling Beatrice. When he finally spoke, each word cost him a visible effort. "This is Beatriz de Montemayor, my wife." The words fell into the silence like stones into a deep well. Isabel felt her legs weaken. She leaned against the doorframe to keep from falling. "Your wife?" Beatrice fell ill during the epidemic of 1846. A brain fever. She was left like this. Raphael's eyes were full of unshed tears. "Mentally, she is a 5-year-old child. She doesn't recognize me as her husband, only as someone who takes care of her." Isabel looked at the woman who nestled confidently in Raphael's arms, beautiful despite her illness, fragile as a broken porcelain doll, completely dependent on the compassion of others. And she understood in a revelation that hurt more than any physical pain that she could never compete with such a rival. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Because," Raphael hesitated, searching for the words, "because I didn't want to drag you into a life of shadows, because I thought that perhaps I could find happiness without this interfering." "Without this interfering?" Isabel's voice took on a hysterical note. "Raphael, she is your wife. Before the law, yes. But before God, Isabel, there is nothing between us but compassion. She doesn't know who I really am. To her, I am just a kind person who protects her." Isabel observed the scene. Raphael patiently comforting the child woman, Esperanza and Soledad waiting to put her to bed. Patricio standing at the entrance like a guardian of ancient secrets. The entire staff knew. They all participated in the pious charade that kept Beatrice protected from the cruelty of the world. And she, Isabel, was about to marry a man who belonged to another woman. I need to think, she managed to say, backing away. Isabel, please, let me explain. But she was already running down the corridor, tears finally breaking like a dam giving way to pressure. Back in her room, she fell onto the bed, sobbing, as the truth struck her with devastating force. She loved a man who could never be entirely hers, and she had discovered this on the eve of what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Outside, the moon continued to pour its silver light over the silent gardens, indifferent to the human drama unfolding within the ancient walls of Castillo de Valdemar. The dawn arrived as grey as molten lead, perfectly mirroring Isabel's state of mind. She had not slept a single moment. She had spent the night sitting by the window, watching the shadows move slowly across the gardens, as her mind processed the devastating revelation. Beatriz de Montemayor, Raphael's wife, reduced by illness to an eternal child in constant need of care. For Isabel now understood so many things. The nightly murmurs, the careful tension of the servants, the deep melancholy that inhabited Raphael's eyes like a permanent shadow. He was a man imprisoned by his own compassion, the guardian of a broken soul who depended entirely on his protection. Around 5 in the morning, a soft knock on the door interrupted her tortured reflections. "Isabel!" Raphael's voice, laden with exhaustion and despair. "Please, I need to talk to you." She remained motionless, unable to face those brown eyes she had learned to love, knowing now that they could never look at her without the shadow of another woman between them. "Isabel, I know you're awake. Please." The silence stretched on until his footsteps receded down the corridor. Isabel heard him stop at her door twice more during the morning, but she did not have the courage to answer. Around noon, Esperanza brought a tray with a half-eaten meal. "Señorita, the Count asked me to give you this," she said, offering a sealed envelope with the Montemayor crest. Isabel took the letter with trembling hands, but only opened it after the maid had left. "My dearest Isabel, I know my silence seems an unforgivable betrayal, and perhaps it is, but you must know that I never intended to cause you pain. When I first saw you, I thought I had found a miracle, someone who had returned color to my gray days. The happiness I felt by your side was the first real happiness I had known in over 3 years. Beatrice fell ill in September of 1846. We had been married for only 8 months. The brain fever devastated her mind, leaving only the fragments of a frightened child in a woman's body. The doctors said she would never recover. I could have had her committed to an institution, as many families do, but I promised her father, on his deathbed, that I would never abandon her. It is a promise I cannot break, even if it means renouncing my own happiness. You deserve a man who can belong entirely to you, not someone divided between love and duty. That is why I did not tell you the truth. I wanted to spare you this burden. If you can forgive me, if you can accept sharing me with this responsibility, I will be waiting in the chapel. If you cannot, and I would understand perfectly, know that these months by your side have been the happiest of my life. With eternal love, Raphael." Isabel slowly folded the letter, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Understanding did not lessen the pain. Raphael was an honorable man, a prisoner of cruel circumstances, but that did not change the fact that she would never be the only woman in his life. The decision crystallized in her mind with painful clarity. She stood up, opened the wardrobe, and began to take out her few clothes. There wasn't much to take. She had arrived at the castle with one small suitcase, and she would leave the same way. As she packed her things, she took from the nightstand drawer the engagement ring Raphael had given her, an antique Montemayor family cameo, delicate and precious. She wrapped it in a silk handkerchief and placed it on the table, along with a simple note. "Raphael, I understand your situation and I admire your loyalty, but I cannot live in the shadow of another's love, even if that love is compassion. I wish you all possible happiness. Isabel." She put on her traveling dress, the same navy blue one she had worn upon her arrival, and covered herself with the wool shawl. She took her small suitcase and silently left the room that had been her refuge for so many months. The corridor was deserted. Isabel walked quickly to the main staircase but stopped when she heard voices coming from the study. "Is Tia Isabel really leaving?" Carmen's voice, filled with sadness. "I don't know, Pequeña. Let's hope not." Raphael's reply sounded exhausted. Isabel closed her eyes, feeling her heart break. Carmen would be left without understanding, thinking she had been abandoned once again. But there was no alternative that wouldn't cause pain to someone. She hurried down the stairs and headed for the stables. Jose, the coachman, was brushing the horses. "I need to go to town," she said simply. "Can you prepare the cart?" The man looked at her in surprise but nodded. "Certainly, señorita. When do you wish to leave?" "Now." The journey to Medina del Campo was a blur of pain. Isabel watched Castillo de Valdemar disappear in the distance, its towers becoming mere dark points against the cloudy sky. She carried in her heart the image of Rafael consoling Beatrice, the memory of Carmen asking if she was leaving, and the certainty that she had made the only possible choice to preserve her dignity. In Medina del Campo, she found lodging in a modest boarding house run by a kind widow, Doña Remedios. Her saved money would allow for a few months of frugal living while she looked for work. An opportunity arose quickly. A school for girls from merchant families was looking for a French and music teacher. The salary was modest but sufficient for a simple and dignified life. Isabel rented a small but clean room in a family home and began to rebuild her existence far from the stone walls that held her broken heart. She taught in the morning, sewed in the afternoon to supplement her income, and at night she read by candlelight, trying to find in books the comfort that life had denied her. But even in the simplicity of her new life, Rafael remained present in every thought. She wondered how Carmen was, if Beatrice was still having nightmares, if he sometimes thought of her with longing. The months passed slowly, like the pages of a melancholy book. Isabel had established a routine that gave her purpose without happiness. Existing was not living, but it was all she could do while time did not heal the open wounds in her heart. And at Castillo de Valdemar, a man continued to fulfill his duties with unwavering loyalty, holding in his heart the memory of a few months of happiness that had shone in his life like stars on a stormy night before disappearing forever. The summer of 1850 arrived in Medina del Campo, laden with dry heat and golden dust that danced in the sun's rays. Isabel had established a routine that, if not bringing happiness, at least offered the dignity of honest work. Her students at the school, girls from 8 to 15, daughters of prosperous merchants, appreciated her gentle teaching methods, and slowly she had earned the respect of the local community. She now lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city, with only 2 rooms but clean and airy, where she could receive private piano students in the afternoons. The tiny garden produced enough vegetables for her frugal meals, and she had learned to find simple beauty in small joys. The scent of wild roses growing by the wall, the song of birds at dawn, the satisfaction of seeing a student master a difficult lesson. But Raphael remained present in every thought, like a distant music that never completely ceased. She constantly wondered how Carmen was, if she was continuing with her studies, if she missed her. And in an intimate confession she disliked admitting even to herself, she thought of Raphael, of his melancholy brown eyes, the kindness with which he treated everyone around him, the weight of responsibility he carried on his shoulders like an invisible cloak. The news came one August morning, brought by a merchant who had come from Valdemar to trade grain. "Doña Isabel, didn't you used to live at Castillo de Valdemar?" asked Don Esteban, a cordial man who often brought news from neighboring regions. Isabel felt the blood freeze in her veins. "Yes. Why do you ask?" "There was a terrible fire 3 weeks ago. Lightning struck the North Tower during a storm. They say the fire spread quickly through that entire wing of the castle." The words hit Isabel like successive blows to the chest. She dropped her teacup, which shattered on the stone floor. And the people? Is everyone all right?" Don Esteban lowered his eyes, and Isabel understood there was more. The Count was injured trying to save, well, there was someone trapped in the tower. They couldn't save her in time. And the orphan girl who lived there, Carmen, she is fine, thank heavens. The Count risked his life to pull her from the flames. Isabel could barely breathe. Beatrice, poor Beatrice, who lived like an eternal child in that nursery, must have been terrified by the fire. And Raphael injured. The Count, is he seriously hurt? He lost the sight in one eye and was left with scars on his face and hands, but he is alive, thank God. That night Isabel couldn't close her eyes. She walked through the small garden under the starlight, her heart torn by the news. Beatrice was dead, Raphael injured and scarred forever, and she hadn't been there to help when they needed her most. The letter arrived 2 weeks later. Isabel immediately recognized Carmen's childish handwriting, neater than usual, as if each word had been carefully considered before being written. "Dear Tia Isabel, Esperanza helped me write this letter because I don't know all the right words yet. Our house caught fire. It was very scary. Senora Beatriz couldn't get out in time and went to heaven with the angels. Tio Rafael cried a lot, but he said that now she won't have any more nightmares. Tio Rafael got hurt, trying to save everyone. His face has a mark on it now, and one of his eyes can't see anymore. But he is still the same good man he always was. He is just sadder. Our house has become ashes and tears. We now live in a small house near Valladolid. It's different, but Tio Rafael says a home is made with people who love each other, not with stone walls. Tia Isabel, he thinks of you every day. Sometimes I see him looking at the place where you used to sit to give me my lessons. Esperanza says he keeps the ring you returned in a special drawer, along with a dried flower you left forgotten in the French book. Can you come back to us? Tio Rafael needs someone to make him smile again, and I miss our lessons so much. With love, Carmen Pixay. Mistral is fine. He escaped the fire on his own, as cats know how to do. Isabel read the letter 5 times before she could fully process it. Beatriz was dead. Rafael, free from his tragic promise, but scarred forever by the fire and the guilt of what he could not save. Carmen, once again facing loss, but still able to think of the well-being of others. That night, sitting at the small table in her kitchen, Isabel wrote and rewrote a reply several times. How could she express the pain she felt for not having been there? How could she explain to Carmen that the wounds of the heart sometimes take longer to heal than those of the body? Finally, she settled on simple words. My dearest Carmen, I received your letter with tears in my eyes. I am deeply sorry for the loss of Senora Beatriz, and my heart aches to know that Tio Rafael was injured. I thank God that you are well. I need a little more time to heal the wounds of the soul, just as Tio Rafael needs time to heal the wounds of the body. But know that I think of you both every day, and that the love I feel for you has not changed. Take good care of Tio Rafael, and continue to be the brave girl you have always been. One day, when the time is right, perhaps we can meet again. With all my love, Tia Isabel P.S. Tell Mistral that I remember him fondly. After sending the letter, Isabel continued her simple life in Medina del Campo, but something had profoundly changed in her heart. Beatriz was no longer between them, but her death had brought Rafael wounds that were perhaps even deeper than his previous responsibility. Would she be able to love a man marked by tragedy? Would she have the strength to help him rebuild not just a life, but faith in the possibility of being happy again? The answers would come with time, like all important truths in life. But for the first time in months, Isabel felt something sprout in her chest that she had not dared to nurture: hope. The autumn of 1850 painted Medina del Campo in shades of gold and ochre, with dry leaves dancing on the stone streets like reminders of the inexorable passage of time. Isabel was walking through the main square after her morning classes, carrying a wicker basket for market shopping, when she saw him. He was standing near the central fountain, watching the children play in the water, and for a moment Isabel thought she was dreaming. But there was no mistaking that elegant silhouette, even transformed by tragedy. Raphael seemed to have aged 10 years in a few months. The right side of his face was marked by a scar that ran from his temple almost to the corner of his mouth, not disfiguring, but an indelible reminder of what he had faced. His right eye, Isabel noted with a pang in her heart, was covered by a small black leather patch, elegantly cut, but an unequivocal sign of his lost vision. He wore simple but well-tailored clothes, a dark brown coat, a wool waistcoat, sturdy trousers, the attire of a man who had embraced a more modest life. But it was still Raphael. The erect posture, the natural elegance of his movements, the silent concentration with which he observed the world. Isabel felt her heart race as if she had run for miles. He turned at that moment, as if sensing her gaze, and when he saw her, the transformation in his expression was like the sun breaking through stormy clouds. The smile that lit up his face, the unmarked side revealing genuine joy, the scarred side showing the marks of suffering, was both devastating and hopeful. Isabel, his voice was deeper, filled with restrained emotion. You are even more beautiful. She approached slowly, the forgotten basket in her hand, her eyes fixed on that face she knew by heart, but which now carried the visible history of what he had been through. Raphael, how did you know I was here? Carmen told me about your letters. It wasn't difficult to find out where you lived. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair, in a gesture Isabel remembered well. I came because I needed to see you. I needed to know if there was any possibility of... He didn't finish the sentence, but Isabel understood. They stood looking at each other in silence in the bustling square, two souls who had met, lost each other, and now found each other again, marked by experiences that had changed them forever. "Can we talk?" he asked. "There's a tavern on the corner, a quiet place." Isabel nodded, still unable to form words. They walked side by side through the stone streets, and she noticed that he limped slightly, another consequence of the fire, she presumed. The tavern was small and cozy, with dark wooden tables and windows that filtered the golden afternoon light. Raphael chose a table in a secluded corner, and when they sat facing each other, Isabel could finally study his face up close. The scar did not disfigure him. It merely gave him a more mature, more experienced air. But it was his eyes, the left eye, that remained, that impressed her most. There was a new depth in it, as if he had seen things that had forever changed his understanding of the world. "How is Carmen?" was the first question she managed to ask. Raphael's face softened. "She has grown so much. The tragedy has matured her, but it hasn't stolen her natural joy. She's in a school in Valladolid now, with girls her age." He smiled. "She speaks French fluently, thanks to your lessons. And you? How are you really?" Raphael remained silent for a long moment, turning the teacup between his hands. Isabel noticed the scars that marked his fingers, small but permanent reminders of his fight against the flames. "Different," he said finally. "The man you knew at the castle died in that fire, Isabel. Not physically, but inside. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about my duties, about what it meant to be a Montemayor, it all turned to ash along with the ancient stones. And who is the man who survived? Someone simpler, poorer in material possessions, but perhaps richer in understanding." He raised his eyes to meet hers. "Someone who learned that titles and properties mean nothing when you lose what truly matters." Isabel felt tears prick her eyes. "Raphael, about Beatrice, I am so sorry." "Don't be." His voice was gentle but firm. "She found peace. For 3 years she lived trapped in a mind that couldn't understand the world. Now she is free, but you carry guilt. I can see it in your eyes. I carry responsibility. It's different." He leaned forward, moving closer to her. "Isabel, I came here not to ask for forgiveness for the past, but to find out if there is a possible future for us." "What do you mean?" "I lost almost everything in the fire. The castle, the fortune, the titles. All that's left is a small property near Valladolid and a modest pension. I cannot offer the life of luxury a countess deserved, but I can offer something I could never give before. A heart that is entirely free, not divided between love and obligation." Isabel understood then that this was not an apology but a new proposal. Not from the Count of Valdemar to a governess, but from a simple man to the woman he loved, with no barriers between them except those she herself chose to maintain. "Raphael, the scars, do they bother you?" Isabel slowly extended her hand and gently touched the scar that crossed his face. He closed his eye under her touch as if receiving a blessing. "They don't bother me. They are marks of your courage, of your love for those you protected. How could I see them as a flaw?" "Then there is hope." Isabel withdrew her hand but kept her eyes fixed on his. "There is always hope, Raphael, but I need time to understand my own feelings. You are no longer the man I knew, and I am no longer the woman I was. Perhaps we need to get to know each other again." He nodded, understanding. "I have time. I have a lifetime." They talked until dusk, sharing stories of their months apart, rediscovering the ease with which their souls communicated. When they parted at the tavern door, Raphael gently took her hand and kissed it with the same reverence as before. "I will be in town for a few days, staying at the inn near the church. If you would like to see me again." "I would," Isabel replied, surprising herself with the quickness of her response. That night in her small house, Isabel sat by the window looking at the stars. Raphael had returned to her life transformed by tragedy, more human, more accessible, more free. The question she asked herself was whether she was prepared to love him, not in spite of his scars, but including them as an integral part of the man he had become. The answer came as softly as a night breeze. She was not only prepared, but eager to discover what new form of love could be born from the ashes of what they had lost. Winter arrived early in Medina del Campo that year of 1850, bringing with it biting winds and the first snow in December. Isabel had established a new rhythm of life. Her mornings were still dedicated to classes at the school, but her afternoons were often filled with long conversations with Raphael, who had decided to stay in town indefinitely. They would meet at the tavern, walk through the public gardens when the weather permitted, or simply talk in the small living room of Isabel's house, always with the door open to preserve conventions. It was a different courtship from the first, more mature, less urgent, built on a foundation of mutual knowledge and shared scars. Raphael had told her about his life in the months after the fire, the sale of the castle ruins, the move to the modest house in Valladolid, the discovery that he could be happy with much less than he had imagined necessary. Isabel, in turn, spoke of her own journey, the rewarding work as a teacher, the independence she had gained, the strength she had discovered she possessed when forced to rebuild her life alone. "You have become stronger," Raphael observed one cold afternoon as they had tea by Isabel's fireplace. "There is a confidence in you that wasn't there before. Necessity teaches." Isabel smiled, pouring more tea. "I discovered that I can take care of myself. And do you still want someone to take care of you?" The question, asked with kindness but laden with meaning, touched the core of her dilemmas. Isabel had learned to value her independence, but she had also rediscovered that sharing her life with someone did not necessarily mean losing autonomy. "I want someone to walk beside me," she answered carefully. "Not someone to carry me, or someone I have to carry. And me? Am I that someone?" She studied his face, the now familiar scars, the single eye that watched her with intensity, the infinite patience with which he awaited her answer. "You are becoming him." It was in this atmosphere of careful rediscovery that Carmen arrived for the Christmas festivities. Isabel first saw her from the window of her house, a 10-year-old girl jumping from a modest carriage, her brown hair now longer, tied in elegant braids, dressed simply, but with the graceful posture Isabel remembered well. Carmen had grown, not just physically but in maturity, now carrying a new seriousness mixed with the natural joy of childhood. "Tia Isabel!" she shouted upon seeing her at the door, running into her arms with a spontaneity that instantly melted away any distance time might have created. "Carmen, my dear, how you've grown!" They hugged for a long time, and Isabel felt tears stream down her face. It was as if a part of her heart, held in suspense for months, had finally returned to its place. "Tio Raphael said you live in a small house now, like us. Can I see?" Isabel made a point of showing every corner of her modest home, and Carmen approved of everything with genuine enthusiasm. The tiny but well-kept garden, the room that served as a music studio, the books arranged with care on improvised shelves. "It's cozy," the girl concluded, sitting in the armchair near the fireplace. "It seems like a place where one can be happy." That evening, when the three of them had dinner together at Isabel's house, Carmen monopolized the conversation with stories about her new school, the friends she had made, the lessons she had learned. But Isabel noticed that the girl was watching them carefully, studying the dynamic between them with a perception that was surprising for her age. It was on the second day of her visit that Carmen asked to speak with Isabel alone. "Tia Isabel, can I tell you a secret?" They were in the small garden, Isabel pruning the roses for winter, while Carmen played with a stray cat she had temporarily adopted. "Of course, my dear." Carmen came closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Tio Raphael never loved Señora Beatriz, not like a husband loves a wife." The revelation, spoken with the simplicity of childhood, struck Isabel like a bolt from the blue. "Carmen, how can you know that?" "Because I paid attention." The girl sat on the grass, serious. "Tio Raphael took care of her as if she were his little daughter, not his wife. He explained to me that they married because it was an agreement between their families, but that she got sick before they could really get to know each other." Isabel stopped pruning, her hands trembling slightly. "And why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know that when Tio Raphael looks at you, his eyes are different. They shine in a way they never did when he looked at Señora Beatriz." Carmen picked up a dry leaf, twirling it between her fingers. "Esperanza told me that he keeps the ring you returned in a special box. Sometimes when he thinks no one is watching, he takes it out and looks at it as if it were the most precious thing in the world." Silent tears streamed down Isabel's cheeks. "Carmen, my dear." "Tia Isabel, Tio Raphael was injured trying to save Señora Beatriz not because he loved her as a wife, but because he was a good man who could not abandon someone helpless. Just as he saved me from the flames, because he loves me as a daughter." The girl stood up, coming closer. "But you, he loves you in a different way, the way a man should love a woman." The child's precocious wisdom touched Isabel deeply. Carmen had observed, understood, and kept these perceptions with surprising maturity. "And you? What do you think about it?" "I think you were both foolish to separate over someone who wasn't really there anymore." Carmen smiled with the frankness of childhood. "And I think I would be very happy if you became my teacher again, forever." That night, after Carmen had retired to the guest room Isabel had improvised, she lay awake for hours, processing the girl's revelations. Raphael had never loved Beatrice romantically. He had only honorably fulfilled a responsibility that circumstances had made tragic. His loyalty to his sick wife came not from conjugal love, but from the fundamental compassion of his noble nature. The last barrier in her heart, the fear of competing with the memory of a great love, crumbled like a wall struck by a storm. Raphael was, and always had been, free to love her completely. For the first time in over a year, Isabel slept a deep and peaceful sleep, dreaming of golden possibilities she could finally embrace without reservation. The day dawned crystal clear, with that special quality of winter light that seems to wash the world in shades of silver and pale gold. Isabel awoke with a feeling of lightness she hadn't experienced in months, as if during the night some invisible weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Carmen's revelations had wrought a profound transformation in her understanding of past events. Raphael was not a man torn between two women, but someone who had honorably fulfilled his duties while saving his heart for the one true love of his life. The guilt Isabel had carried for competing with Beatrice proved to be unfounded. There could be no competition where there had never been romantic love. After breakfast, Carmen announced her plans for the day with the natural authority of a determined child. "I'm going to visit the school where Tia Isabel teaches. I want to meet her students and see what it's like to give lessons to so many girls at once." "And me?" asked Raphael, smiling at the girl's determination. "Oh, you, sir, are going to stay here and help Tia Isabel prepare lunch. You have important matters to discuss." The child's innocent manipulation was so transparent that both adults laughed, but they agreed to the plan. Carmen left, accompanied by Doña Remedios, who had offered to make the introductions, leaving Raphael and Isabel alone in the small house. A different kind of silence settled between them, not awkward, but charged with expectation, as if they both knew that this moment would mark an important turning point in their lives. Isabel prepared tea, and they sat by the fireplace, watching the flames dance with hypnotic regularity. It was Raphael who broke the silence. "Carmen spoke with you yesterday. I can see in your eyes that something has changed. She told me about you and Beatrice." Isabel chose her words carefully. "That you were never truly husband and wife in the full sense." Raphael lowered his eyes, his hands clenched on his knees. "It was a secret I thought I would take to my grave. I didn't want it to sound like a justification for my omission. But it was important for me to know, Raphael. For all these months I carried the weight of thinking I was competing with the memory of a great love. And you were not." He raised his eyes to meet hers. "Beatrice was an honorable responsibility, not a passion. I married her because it was what our families expected, but she fell ill before we could truly know one another. When the brain fever turned her into an eternal child, I became her protector, not her husband." Isabel felt the last of her resistance dissolve in her heart. "Why didn't you tell me this when we first met?" "Because the truth didn't change the practical facts. I was a married man with responsibilities I could not abandon. I had no right to drag you into a life of shadows, even if those shadows were not what they seemed." Raphael stood up and walked to the window overlooking the small garden. Isabel watched his silhouette against the light, his shoulders still straight despite his trials, his profile marked but not diminished by the scars. "Raphael, look at me." He turned, and Isabel saw in that single eye all the hope and vulnerability he had kept hidden during the long months of separation. "I forgive you for not telling me the whole truth, for making decisions for me, for all the misunderstandings that separated us." She stood up too, moving closer to him. "But there is one condition." "What is it?" "Never again make decisions about my future without consulting me. If we are to build something together, it must be as equals, as partners who respect each other enough to share the difficult choices." A slow smile lit up Raphael's face, transforming his scars into lines of joy. "I accept the condition. In fact, I insist on it." He held out his hands, and Isabel took them without hesitation. "Isabel Mendoza, will you give me a second chance? Not as the Count of Valdemar with all his complicated baggage, but as Raphael de Montemayor, a simple man who possesses only a modest house, some land, and a love that has grown stronger through every trial." "Raphael de Montemayor," she repeated the name, savoring it. "Yes, I would give that man a second chance. In fact, I think I would fall in love with him more easily than with the distant Count I first met." He gently pulled her closer, and Isabel saw tears glisten in his eye. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? This time knowing the whole truth, making a choice free from any pressure or secrets?" "Yes." The word came out like a sigh of relief. filled with all the joy Isabel had suppressed during the months of uncertainty. "Yes, I want to marry you." The kiss that sealed that promise was different from any romantic gesture Isabel had ever imagined. There was no urgency or desperate passion, but a deep tenderness, the recognition of two souls who had met, lost each other, and finally found each other again on solid ground. When they parted, Raphael rested his forehead against hers, breathing as if he had run a great distance. "This time it will be forever, Isabel. There are no more obstacles between us. Not even your scars. Especially them. They are part of who I have become, and you accept them." Isabel gently touched the scar that crossed his face, feeling beneath her fingers the story of courage and sacrifice it represented. "I don't just accept them. I love them, because they are marks of the man you chose to be." They stood embracing by the window, watching the snow begin to fall outside, like a silent blessing on that moment of reconciliation. When Carmen returned from the school, she found them still like that, and her cry of joy echoed through the small house like celebratory music. The family that fate had torn apart was finally reunited, no longer by the chances of life, but by the conscious choice to build a future together based on true love, mutual understanding, and the wisdom gained through overcoming great trials. The spring of 1851 arrived in Valladolid, laden with golden promises, the scent of wildflowers, and the gentle music of birds heralding renewal. Isabel awoke in her new home, a small rural property a few kilometers from the city, with a light heart and the spontaneous smile that had become constant since her wedding. The ceremony had been simple, exactly as she and Raphael had wished. In the church of Santa Maria in Medina del Campo, with a radiant Carmen as the maid of honor, Esperanza and Soledad as emotional witnesses, and Father Martin officiating with tears of joy in his eyes at seeing Raphael finally find true happiness. Isabel had worn a simple but elegant dress of light blue silk, with orange blossoms in her hair. Raphael, impeccable in his best dark suit, had cried openly as she walked to the altar, tears not of sadness but of deep gratitude to the fate that had finally brought them together without obstacles. "Do you promise to love each other, in prosperity and in adversity, in sickness and in health until death do you part?" "We promise," they had answered in unison, their voices firm, their eyes fixed on each other, as if no one else existed in the world. Now 3 months later, Isabel walked through the flowering fields surrounding her new home, watching Raphael work in the vegetable garden he had planted with his own hands. The scars on his fingers had softened with time and the tilling of the earth, and she realized he had found in rural simplicity a peace that aristocratic salons had never offered him. The house was modest but cozy, 2 bedrooms, a large room that served as a library and living room, and a spacious kitchen where they took their meals at a rustic wooden table that Raphael had carved during the winter. The windows opened onto gardens that Isabel had planted with love, roses, lavender, aromatic herbs, and vegetables that supplied their frugal but abundant table. Carmen visited them regularly, always bringing news from her school in Valladolid, and a contagious joy that lit up the house. At 11, she had grown into a young woman of rare inner beauty, combining the grace learned at the castle with a practical wisdom acquired through her trials. Her brown eyes shone with a lively intelligence, and her French already surpassed that of many ladies in society. "Tia Isabel, Tio Raphael," she shouted one golden June morning, jumping from the cart that had brought her from the city. "I have wonderful news." They approached, Raphael wiping his dirt-stained hands on his apron, Isabel drying her wet hands on a kitchen towel. Carmen danced from one foot to the other, clearly bursting to tell her secret. "Don Fernando Alvarez, the cloth merchant, asked to speak with me yesterday. He wants to know if I agree to his son Carlos courting me when I turn 16. Isabel and Raphael exchanged amused glances. Carlos Alvarez was a serious and hard-working young man of 18, the son of one of Valladolid's most prosperous families. Carmen had been speaking of him for months with sparkling eyes. "And what did you answer?" asked Raphael, sitting on the bench under the grapevine to speak at the girl's level. "I said I needed to speak with my guardians." Carmen smiled mischievously. "After all, you are my family now." The word family echoed in Isabel's heart with a special sweetness. That was exactly what they had become. Not just husband and wife, but a chosen family bound by ties stronger than blood, love, mutual respect, and a commitment to care for one another. During lunch at the kitchen table, they talked about Carmen's plans. Carlos was a young man of good family and better character, and the prospect of a respectful and happy engagement for the girl filled their hearts with joy. "Imagine," said Carmen, nibbling on a pear from the orchard, "in a few years I will have my own children, and they will call you grandparents." Isabel felt her cheeks flush slightly. It was a dream she secretly nurtured, to have children with Raphael, to create a family that was entirely their own. As if reading her thoughts, Raphael gently took her hand across the table. "Perhaps Carmen won't be the only one with news to share soon," he said softly, his eyes fixed on hers, with a warmth that made her blush even more. Life followed its gentle and prosperous rhythm. Raphael managed the lands with a competence that surprised even himself. He discovered he had a natural talent for agriculture and animal husbandry. Isabel continued to give private lessons in music and French to the daughters of prosperous farmers, contributing to the household budget and keeping her passion for teaching alive. The evenings were special. They would sit by the fireplace, Raphael reading aloud while Isabel sewed or embroidered, talking about everything: plans to improve the property, memories of the past, dreams for the future. The intimacy they developed was different from the dramatic passion of novels. It was deeper, built on mutual understanding and the genuine admiration they felt for each other. At the end of the summer, Isabel confirmed her suspicions. She was expecting a child. The news was received with tears of joy. Raphael lifted her in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed and protested that she would get dizzy. That night, lying side by side in their simple but comfortable bed, they planned the future with the golden hope of couples who discover their love will create new life. "If it's a boy, we can name him Eduardo, after my grandfather," Raphael suggested, his hand resting gently on Isabel's still flat stomach. "And if it's a girl, Elena. It means she who shines like the sun." Isabel smiled in the dark. "Elena or Eduardo. Beautiful names for our first child." "First?" Raphael propped himself up on his elbow to look at her. "Are you already planning a large family?" "I'm not planning anything," she laughed softly. "Just letting fate decide. But it would be lovely if Carmen had many little siblings to love." The winter of 1851 brought not only cold, but also the news of Carmen's official engagement to Carlos Alvarez. The betrothal ceremony was simple but emotional. The young man, nervous but determined, formally presented himself to Raphael as the head of the family to request the girl's hand. Isabel watched from the kitchen, smiling as she saw Raphael naturally assume the role of a protective father, asking serious questions about the suitor's intentions and capabilities, but clearly approving of Carmen's choice. Christmas was celebrated with simple joy. Esperanza and Soledad came to visit, bringing news that they had opened a boarding house in Medina del Campo and were prospering. Patricio, now with completely white hair but still elegant, brought gifts for everyone and funny stories about his new life as a butler for a merchant family in Burgos. "I never thought I would be happier serving merchants than nobles," he confessed during dinner. "But I discovered that happiness has more to do with the people around us than with the titles of those we serve." New Year's Eve found Isabel and Raphael alone at home, with Carmen visiting her future in-laws in Valladolid. Sitting by the fireplace, watching the flames dance, they took stock of the year that was ending. "When I think of the man I was 2 years ago," said Raphael, contemplative, "I barely recognize myself. That melancholy count, trapped in a castle full of secrets, seems like a character from a novel I once read. And you don't miss it? The grandeur, the titles, the social importance?" Raphael turned to her, his single eye shining with absolute sincerity. "How can I miss a life where I wasn't truly happy?" He gently touched Isabel's belly, where a small bump was beginning to form. "This simple life gave me you. It will give me our children. It gave me Carmen as a daughter of the heart. What more can a man desire?" Isabel covered his hand with hers. "Only that it continues for many, many years." "It will, I promise." Outside, the winter wind blew across the sleeping fields, but inside the small house, the warmth of true love kept any cold at bay. 1851 ended with golden promises of lasting happiness, built not on foundations of wealth or social position, but on the most solid ground of all: genuine love, mutual respect, and the wisdom to value the simple blessings that make life truly rich. The year 1859 brought with it not only the fullness of domestic happiness, but also the most severe test that Isabel and Raphael would face as a couple. 8 years of marriage had blessed their union with 3 children. Eduardo, now 8, a serious and intelligent boy who had inherited his father's brown eyes and the natural kindness of both parents. Elena, 5. A radiant child who filled the house with crystal laughter and a fertile imagination. And little Gabriel, only 2, who crawled through the house with the stubborn determination of babies, determined to explore every corner of the world. Carmen, now an 18-year-old young woman, had married Carlos Alvarez the previous autumn in a ceremony that filled everyone's hearts with joy. The couple lived in a prosperous house in Valladolid, and Carmen visited regularly, always bringing gifts for her little siblings and stories of her new married life. The rural property had prospered beyond their most optimistic expectations. Rafael had proven to be an exceptional administrator, gradually expanding his lands, introducing modern agricultural techniques, and establishing a reputation for honesty that attracted buyers from all over the region. Isabel continued to teach, but now at a school they had built on the property itself to serve the children of the local farm workers. It was a full life, rich in love and purpose, until the letter arrived one golden September morning. Isabel recognized it immediately by the official seal. It was from the royal court in Madrid. Rafael opened it with fingers that trembled slightly, read it in silence, and his face gradually paled to the color of wax. "What is it?" Isabel asked, feeling a premonitory chill run down her spine. "King Ferdinand VII has died. His daughter Isabella II has assumed the throne, but there are conflicts over the succession." Rafael folded the letter carefully. "They are summoning all nobles with hereditary titles to return to Madrid and swear allegiance to the new queen." Isabel felt the ground sway beneath her feet. But you lost everything in the fire. You no longer have the title of count." "The title is hereditary, Isabel. The castle, the lands, the fortune were lost, but the blood of the Montemayor's cannot be erased by flames." He stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the golden fields. "If I do not appear, I will be considered a traitor to the crown. The consequences could be severe." The word hung in the air like a sharp blade. Isabel immediately understood what was not being said: confiscation of property, imprisonment, exile, or worse. Spain was going through a turbulent period, and the loyalty of the nobles was a matter of life and death for political stability. "Then we will go to Madrid," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "No." Rafael's answer was immediate and definitive. "You and the children will stay here. I don't know how long this business will last. It could be weeks. It could be months. Rafael, don't leave me behind. We are a family. Exactly why I cannot expose you to the dangers of the court. Madrid is a dangerous place now, full of political intrigue and violence." He turned to her, and Isabel saw tears shining in his eye. "Isabel, there is something else you need to know." The tone of his voice made Isabel's blood run cold. "What else?" "Don Alvaro de Mendoza, a distant cousin who managed the Montemayor estates during my involuntary absence, is claiming the title of Count of Valdemar. He alleges that my marriage to you is invalid because it was not approved by the crown, and therefore I have no legitimate heirs." Isabel felt the world spin around her. She sat down heavily in the nearest chair. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not just going to swear allegiance to the Queen. I'm going to fight for the right to keep my name, my title, and the future of our children." Rafael knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Isabel, if I lose this battle, our children could be left without an inheritance, without legal protection. They might even question the legitimacy of our marriage." "But we were married in the church, with witnesses. We married as common people, not as nobles. In aristocratic law there are differences. Don Alvaro is using those differences to try to steal what is ours by right." Isabel slowly absorbed the magnitude of the situation. This was not just about Rafael leaving for a few weeks, but about a fight that could determine the future of their entire family. If they lost, they could lose everything: land, home, financial security, and even the legal recognition of their union. "When must you leave?" "Within 2 weeks." The 2 weeks that followed were the most difficult Isabel had ever faced. During the day, she maintained a forced normalcy for the children, but at night, lying beside Rafael, she felt fear grow in her chest, like a poisonous weed. "What if you don't come back?" she whispered on one of the last nights. "I will come back." His voice was firm, but Isabel sensed the uncertainty he was trying to hide. "I promise I will come back. Rafael, we have been happy in this simple life for 8 years. Why can't we just renounce the title, forget Madrid, and continue to be prosperous farmers?" "Because Don Alvaro will not allow it. If I do not fight for my rights, he will use the crown to destroy us anyway." Rafael pulled her closer. This is our only chance to protect our children's future. On the morning of his departure, Isabel dressed Eduardo, Elena, and Gabriel in their best clothes to bid their father a proper farewell. The children did not fully understand the gravity of the situation. They only knew that Papa was going away on important business and that they had to be brave. "Take care of Mama," Raphael said to Eduardo, hugging his son with a fierce tenderness. "I'll be back soon, Princess," he promised Elena, who was crying, clinging to his neck. Gabriel, too small to understand, just waved his chubby little hand when Raphael kissed him. Isabel's farewell was private, in the room they shared. Raphael held her as if he wanted to memorize every curve of her body, every scent of her hair. "If anything happens to me," he began. "Nothing will happen," Isabel interrupted, sealing his lips with a desperate kiss. "If something happens," he insisted gently, "Carmen and Carlos will take care of you. Esperanza has instructions about the hidden savings. And remember, you are stronger than you think. You have proven it before. Just come back to me, Raphael. Come back to us. Always. Forever." And then he was gone, riding down the road that led to Madrid, leaving behind not just a family that loved him, but also 8 years of simple happiness that could disappear forever, depending on the whims of royal politics and the ambitions of a greedy cousin. Isabel remained on the veranda until Raphael's silhouette was lost on the horizon, the children clinging to her skirts, all watching the man who was the center of their worlds depart for a battle whose outcome would determine if the family they had built with so much love could survive the storms of the outside world. The ultimate test of their love had begun. 6 months passed like 6 years in Isabel's soul. The winter of 1859 was the longest and coldest she could remember, not only because of the snowstorms that covered the fields in pristine white, but because of Raphael's absence, which turned each day into an eternity of agonizing waiting. Letters arrived irregularly, brought by messengers on sweaty horses that crossed the distance between Madrid and Valladolid. Through these letters, Isabel followed the legal and political battle Raphael was waging in the capital, endless hearings with royal judges, witnesses called to confirm the legitimacy of their marriage, ancient documents being examined by scribes who would decide the fate of her family. "My dearest Isabel," one of the letters read, "Don Alvaro is using every resource at his disposal to question our union. He has hired the best lawyers in Madrid and has the support of influential nobles who would rather see a Montemayor under their control than an independent man like me. But do not give up on me. Father Martin came to court to testify about our ceremony, and Carmen sent a sworn statement about the circumstances of Beatrice's death. The truth is on our side." While she waited, Isabel discovered reserves of strength she never knew she possessed. She managed the property alone throughout the winter, made difficult decisions about planting and sales, kept the school running for the children of the region, and above all, maintained the emotional stability of her children, who asked daily when Papa would come home. Eduardo, at 8, took on the responsibilities of an older boy with touching seriousness. He helped his mother with heavy chores, looked after his younger siblings, and on long nights read stories to Elena and Gabriel before bed, just as Raphael used to do. Elena, as sensitive as any 5-year-old, spent weeks asking if Papa still loved them, if he had found another family in Madrid, if he would be back in time for her birthday. Isabel answered with infinite patience, repeating the same loving reassurances night after night. Gabriel, too young to understand, would simply point to Raphael's empty chair during meals and murmur, "Papa?" in his baby voice, breaking Isabel's heart into microscopic pieces. The spring of 1860 arrived with its eternal promise of renewal, but Isabel hardly dared to hope. Raphael's last letter, received 3 weeks earlier, spoke of an imminent decision and preparing for any outcome. The somber tone suggested that things were not going well in Madrid. It was on a golden May morning, as Isabel worked in the garden while the children played nearby, that Gabriel began to shout, "Papa, Papa," and went running unsteadily on his little legs toward the road. Isabel looked up and saw a familiar figure riding towards the house, but it was not Raphael alone. He was accompanied by an official retinue, men in elegant uniforms, carriages with royal crests, a procession that spoke of official importance. Eduardo and Elena ran to join their little brother, all shouting with joy at seeing their father return. Isabel wiped her hands on her apron, quickly fixed her hair, and walked towards the approaching group, her heart beating so hard she feared she might faint. Raphael dismounted and ran to embrace his children, who threw themselves into his arms like small projectiles of pure joy. Over their little heads, his eyes met Isabel's, and in them she read victory. "Isabel," he said, approaching with the children still clinging to his arms, "I want to introduce you to Don Carlos Mendez, Royal Secretary for Noble Affairs." The elegant man who had approached made a respectful bow. "Countess of Valdemar, it is an honor to meet you. Countess." The words echoed in Isabel's chest like bells of celebration. "Queen Isabella II," the secretary continued, "has determined, after examining all the evidence, that the marriage between Don Rafael de Montemayor, the legitimate Count of Valdemar, and Doña Isabel Mendoza was valid before the laws of God and men. Your Excellency and your children are officially recognized as a noble family of the Spanish crown." Isabel felt her legs weaken. Rafael, noticing, quickly came to her side and held her, whispering in her ear, "We won, my love. We won everything," Don Carlos continued. Furthermore, Her Majesty, impressed by the reports on the agricultural improvements implemented by the Count on his lands, has decided to grant an additional property in recognition of his services to the rural development of the region. "And Don Alvaro?" asked Isabel, still trying to process the magnitude of what she was hearing. "He has been stripped of any claim to the Montemayor titles and exiled from the court for attempting to defraud the crown," the secretary replied with evident satisfaction. That night, after the official retinue had departed, after the children had been put to bed amidst laughter and Papa's stories of his adventure in Madrid, after the house had finally fallen silent, Isabel and Raphael found themselves alone in the room they shared. "I thought I had lost you," she whispered, nestled in his arms. "Never. No matter how many Don Alvaros appear in our lives, no matter what storms we face, I will always come back to you." Raphael gently kissed her hair. "We are stronger than any adversity, Isabel. We have proven it once again. And now, are we officially nobles again?" Raphael laughed softly. "We are nobles on paper, but in our hearts, we have always been prosperous farmers who love each other. Nothing needs to change in how we live, except that our children's future is secure. Except for that, yes." Isabel pulled back slightly to look at his beloved face, the familiar scars, the single eye that watched her with unwavering devotion, the lines that time and responsibility had added, but which only made every feature more precious. "Rafael de Montemayor, Count of Valdemar, farmer, devoted father, perfect husband," she murmured, tracing the outline of his scars with her finger. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "The luck was all mine, Isabel. You saved me from a life of shadows and taught me that true nobility comes not from titles, but from how we treat those we love." They fell asleep in each other's arms, as they had for all the years of their marriage, but this time with the added security of knowing they had passed the ultimate test. Their family was complete, protected, and united by bonds stronger than any adversity the world could present. 10 years passed, like a golden dream. In 1870, Isabel and Raphael celebrated their silver wedding anniversary with a party that brought together the entire region. Carmen and Carlos with their 3 children, Esperanza and Soledad, now elderly but still vibrant, Patricio, retired but ever elegant, and dozens of friends made through years of a simple and generous life. Eduardo had grown into a serious and intelligent 18-year-old, studying modern agriculture at the university and planning to expand the family properties even further. Elena, at 15, was a young woman of rare beauty and intelligence, courted by the best matches in the region, but still focused on her studies and helping her mother at the school on the property. Gabriel, at 12, showed signs of inheriting both his father's intelligence and his mother's artistic sensitivity. Raphael, at 55, had become a respected figure in the region. His agricultural techniques were studied by farmers from all over Spain. His rural school educated hundreds of children, and his generosity was legendary among the less fortunate. Isabel, at 47, blossomed with a mature beauty that came not from youth but from deep happiness. She still taught, still managed the house with loving efficiency, and still looked at Raphael every morning as if seeing a miracle. On the eve of their 25th wedding anniversary, they walked through the gardens they had planted together, observing the rose bushes that had grown from small cuttings into explosions of color and fragrance. "Do you remember the rose your grandmother planted at Castillo de Valdemar?" asked Isabel, stopping before a particularly lush rosebush. "The one she said looked dead in winter, but always came back in the spring." "That's the one. I think we were like that rose, Raphael. We seemed lost during the winter of our separation, but the roots of our love were there, waiting for the right time to bloom again. Raphael stopped, taking her hands in his, hands marked by time and work, but still capable of making his heart race with a simple touch. Isabel Mendoza de Montemayor, you still make me feel like a young man in love, discovering it for the first time, because that is exactly what we are, my love. With each passing day, I discover a new reason to fall in love with you. They walked in silence through the fragrant gardens, two souls who had met by chance, been separated by tragic circumstances, found each other again through perseverance, and built together a life that surpassed all possible dreams. Castillo de Valdemar had been rebuilt by a new owner, but Raphael and Isabel never felt nostalgia for those ancient stones. They had learned that true castles are built not of stone and mortar, but of love, understanding, mutual commitment, and the courage to face together any storm that life presents. As the stars appeared in the violet twilight sky, they returned home hand in hand, knowing they had won the most precious prize two human beings can achieve, a love that grows stronger with every challenge overcome, deeper with every year that passes, more beautiful with every scar that bears witness to the battles won side by side. In the cozy kitchen, Isabel prepared tea, while Raphael lit the fireplace. Soon the children would be back from the city. Carmen would come for dinner with her family, and the table would be filled with cheerful voices, laughter, and the incomparable warmth of a family united by true love. But for a few precious minutes it was just the two of them, Isabel and Raphael, the orphan governess and the melancholy count who discovered that true love knows no social class, is not discouraged by obstacles, and when planted in the soil of honesty and watered with patience, grows into a tree strong enough to shelter entire generations beneath its loving shade. True love is not just a feeling, Isabel thought, watching Raphael stoke the flames in the fireplace. It is a choice one makes every day, a commitment renewed with each dawn, a promise fulfilled even when fulfilling it seems impossible. And as she looked back on the long journey that had brought them, from that first stormy afternoon at Castillo de Valdemar to this serene night in their simple home, surrounded by love, Isabel knew with absolute certainty that every tear shed, every painful separation, every fear faced had been worth it, for it had led them here, to the place where two hearts meet forever, where love conquers all adversity, where happiness is not a stroke of luck, but a deserved achievement through persistence, faith, and the courage to never give up on what truly matters.